What if a single dinner date could ignite an interstellar crisis? When a young human diplomat innocently offers to split the bill, he unknowingly offends an alien tradition that views food as sacred proof of love and strength. What begins as a cultural clash soon spirals into a galaxy-wide debate on equality, identity, and connection. But can understanding grow from misunderstanding? If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel and show a thumbs up by liking the video. It helps more than you know. Now let's jump into the story. The transport pod hissed softly as it docked against the outer ring of Varelia Station, a glittering hub of light and movement suspended above a gas giant. Jonas Reed stepped out, adjusting the collar of his newly pressed diplomatic uniform. His boots made a soft thud on the polished floors, his steps slow as he took in the unbelievable scale of the place. Beings of all shapes and sizes moved around him, some tall and glowing, others short and covered in glistening scales. He'd studied dozens of species back at the Diplomatic Academy, but seeing them up close made everything feel overwhelming and oddly exciting. Jonas was Earth's youngest cultural envoy, freshly assigned to Varelia Station. His mission sounded simple on paper: attend a dinner with a dignitary from Asteron, a proud and ancient race who had only recently opened talks with humans. The meeting was part of a cultural exchange initiative, a way to learn from each other and possibly, someday, cooperate in trade and science. Jonas had read every file, watched every simulation, and memorized every polite phrase in the Asteronian language. Still, nothing could prepare him for his dinner with Nera Vel. Nera was already seated when Jonas arrived at the restaurant, her long limbs relaxed beneath a glowing arch of vines that shimmered under the starlight. The dining dome hovered just beyond the station's ring, a transparent bubble offering an endless view of the stars and nebulae beyond. The galaxy had never felt more real than it did in that moment. Nera's appearance was striking, tall and graceful, with violet skin that caught the light like polished stone and eyes that shimmered gold. She wore ceremonial robes that flowed like liquid metal and a large jeweled pendant that sat neatly at her throat. Jonas greeted her in the formal Asteronian phrase he'd practiced 100 times, and to his relief, she gave him a soft nod of approval. They were joined almost immediately by the restaurant's head chef, Grinks, a small but proud creature with 6 arms and a chef's hat, far too large for his narrow head. He introduced the evening's menu with theatrical flair, spinning the words with grand gestures and offering samples of sizzling dishes from hover trays that danced beside him. Nera chose quickly and confidently, some sort of flame-grilled winged fish and a floral nectar drink. Jonas, still trying to play it cool, ordered the same. Conversation started with small talk, questions about the flight, how Jonas liked the station, what he thought of the art displayed in the promenade. He was careful with his words, speaking clearly and respectfully. Nera seemed amused by his efforts, occasionally arching a brow when he fumbled a phrase or nodded at the wrong time. Yet, despite her cool exterior, she was clearly listening. The food arrived with a dramatic sizzle. The dishes were alien but surprisingly pleasant. Jonas took small bites, copying Nera's movements to avoid offending her. The flavor of the winged fish was smoky and oddly sweet, while the nectar drink left a tingling fizz on his tongue. For the first time since stepping onto the station, Jonas began to relax. Nera seemed less rigid too. She even laughed, just once, when he made a joke about how Earth's cuisine was far less adventurous unless you counted deep-fried butter at state fairs. As the plates were cleared away and dessert was being prepared, Jonas spotted the bill pad approaching. A sleek tablet floated gently to their table. Instinct took over. He reached for it, smiling politely. "Let me take care of this," he said. The moment froze. Nera's face, so serene just moments ago, hardened in a blink. Her gold-flecked eyes widened, her hand freezing in midair. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice suddenly quiet and cold. Jonas blinked, confused. "Just checking the bill. I figured we could split it, or I can pay and you get the next one." The silence was sharp and immediate. The chef backed away slowly, his floating tray halting mid-hover. At a nearby table, A small spherical being paused in its slurping of a soup bowl to glance over with interest. Nera looked as though she had just been insulted on a spiritual level. On Asteron, she said slowly, a true male provides the meal. He demonstrates strength, generosity, and readiness for responsibility. To offer to split the meal implies a rejection of all those qualities. Jonas sat back, stunned. I didn't mean anything like that. It's just normal on Earth to share the cost. It's about equality, not rejection. To Asteronians, Nera said, her voice rising slightly, this meal was more than a meeting. It was an assessment of values, a ritual of compatibility. You reaching for that bill says you're not ready to provide. The tension was rising, like steam from a boiling pot. Nearby diners were clearly watching now, whispers floating across the room in a dozen languages. One alien with bright feathers even tapped the shoulder of another and pointed directly at Jonas. Realizing the situation was slipping out of control, Jonas set the payment tablet back down without finalizing anything. I didn't mean to offend, he said quietly. I only wanted to show respect. Where I come from, that means treating people as equals, not roles. Nera stared at him, her jaw tight. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, she stood, her robes catching the light as she turned. Then perhaps, she said softly, we are not as compatible as I thought. She walked out of the dome without looking back. Jonas sat alone, staring at the stars. The galaxy had never looked so cold. The next morning, Jonas Reed sat at a long glass table in the Earth Embassy, his head resting in his hands. A half-drunk cup of synth coffee steamed next to him. Across from him, Ambassador Bryn Torin paced back and forth like a caged animal. Bryn was a seasoned diplomat with sharp eyes, always dressed as though ready for a televised negotiation. Today, however, his tie was crooked and his hair had a wild edge. The massive holographic display above the table flickered with a looping headline, Human Envoy Suggests Splitting Bill, Asteronian Tradition Insulted. Below the text played a grainy video of Jonas and Nera's dinner, recorded from a curious onlooker's hover drone. Jonas watched, for what felt like the 100th time, as his face filled the screen, smiling as he reached for the bill, followed by Nera's stunned expression. I was trying to be respectful, Jonas muttered. Back home it's normal to split the check. Back home, Bryn replied, rubbing his forehead, is not Varelia Station, and it's definitely not Asteron. Jonas, do you realize how many systems are watching this right now? This isn't just gossip, it's politics now. The Asteronian High Council is demanding an official explanation. Jonas sighed, leaning back in his chair. He didn't mean to start a galactic incident. It had just been dinner. Awkward dinner, sure, but he thought things had gone well until they hadn't. We still have options, Bryn said, finally stopping his pacing. But we need to fix this before it turns into a trade freeze or worse. You need to speak with Nera again, privately. Make it clear this was a misunderstanding, not an insult. Jonas raised an eyebrow. And what if she won't see me? Bryn smiled, though it was thin. She already agreed. She thinks you deserve the chance to explain. You'll meet her in the Arboretum, neutral ground. You leave in 1 hour. An hour later, Jonas entered the Arboretum section of Varelia Station. The air thick with the smell of alien flowers and soft humidity. Giant glowing vines curled around crystal trees, and bioluminescent insects buzzed lazily above. In the center of it all stood Nera, dressed in a deep purple robe with silver embroidery. She did not smile when she saw him. I didn't come here for an apology, she said as he approached. I came to understand. Jonas nodded. That's all I want too. They walked slowly beneath a canopy of shimmering leaves. For a few moments, neither spoke. Finally, Jonas broke the silence. Where I come from, paying for a meal isn't about dominance or tradition. It's about fairness, respect. Women fought hard to be seen as equals, so for a lot of us, splitting the bill isn't just practical, it's symbolic. Nera listened, her face unreadable, On Asteron, males have always been the providers. It's part of our biology. It began when we still lived in caves and carried fire across mountains. That role, providing food, was how they showed strength and reliability. Even now in our cities of light, that idea hasn't changed. I wasn't trying to take anything away from you, Jonas said. I didn't mean to disrespect your traditions, I just didn't realize the meaning behind it. That's the danger, Nera replied, stopping beneath a tree whose petals glowed blue. Assuming other worlds see things the same way, we don't. There was silence again, but this time it didn't feel like a wall. It felt like space to think. You know, Jonas said finally. On Earth, my sister paid for her first date. She said if the guy assumed she couldn't afford a coffee, he wasn't worth her time. It was a small gesture, but it meant something big to her. Nera tilted her head. And on Asteron, if a male allowed a female to pay, it would mean he was incapable of caring for her. That he was weak. Two opposite meanings from the same action, Jonas said, half smiling. It's amazing we've made it this far without fighting over a salad. That made Nera laugh, a real one this time, light and unexpected. Perhaps we were both unprepared, she said softly. You for our traditions, me for yours. Just as the moment began to soften, Nera's wristband lit up with a pulsing red alert. She tapped it, reading the message silently. Her expression turned serious. What is it? Jonas asked. The Asteronian elders have called a formal hearing, she said. They're questioning whether Earth's values are compatible with ours. They believe you've shown disrespect on purpose. Jonas groaned. Over dinner? Over what dinner means, she corrected. They've also requested I testify. He stared at her. And, will you? Nera looked at him, her eyes warm but uncertain. I will, but what I say depends on what I believe to be true. That's why I agreed to meet you today. Jonas felt a nervous chill run through him. He could handle formal debates, difficult negotiations, even smug alien chefs. But standing in front of a room full of powerful aliens with traditions older than Earth's written history? That was another story. Still, he nodded. Then let's tell them the truth. We didn't insult each other. We just didn't understand each other yet. Nera held his gaze for a moment longer, then gave a slow nod. Then we better prepare. We have less than 2 days before the hearing. As they left the Arboretum together, a group of Varelian news drones hovered just outside the exit, lights blinking with anticipation. Jonas whispered, This is still just about dinner, right? Nera smirked. Jonas, read. This might be the most important dinner in the galaxy. The Unity chamber was silent as Jonas Reed stepped onto the central platform, a spotlight following him as hundreds of eyes, some human, some alien, some glowing, some on stalks, watched from the tiered seats that curved around the massive dome. This was not how he imagined his week would go. He'd been sent to discuss food exports and cultural exchange. Instead, he was now defending Earth's entire concept of relationships because he had tried to split a dinner bill. No pressure. Across the room sat the Asteronian delegation, draped in deep red and silver robes, their expressions serious and unreadable. At the center of their group stood Counselor Tovak, a stern-faced elder who had not blinked once since Jonas arrived, and beside him, with her chin held high and her shoulders straight, stood Neravel. She looked every bit the dignitary her people expected her to be. But when she met Jonas's eyes, there was something else there too. A quiet encouragement. The council chair, a tall being made entirely of translucent crystal, tapped its long fingers on a glowing panel. We are here to address concerns raised by the Asteronian High Council, it announced, its voice echoing through hidden speakers. Specifically, whether Earth's customs, as demonstrated during a recent diplomatic meeting, show disregard for established interstellar traditions. Jonas took a slow breath and stepped forward. He had no script, no carefully prepared statement. Just his experience and the hope that honesty would count for something. I didn't know, he began simply. I didn't know that offering to split a bill would feel like an insult. On Earth, it's common. We see it as fairness, respect, equality. But I now understand that on Asteron it means something very different. He paused, scanning the room. Some council members watched with polite interest. Others looked skeptical. This wasn't a political decision. It wasn't meant to challenge anyone's traditions. It was just me, trying to be thoughtful in the way I was raised. That's all. Counselor Tovak rose, his voice firm. Intentions are not enough. Actions speak louder. On Asteron, providing a meal is an ancient custom tied to the very fabric of our society. To ignore that is to dismiss what we are. Jonas nodded. I understand that now, and I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, but isn't that why we're all here? To learn from each other? To exchange not just goods but ideas, and yes, even mistakes? A murmur ran through the chamber. Not loud, but not hostile either. From one of the upper tiers, a younger Asteronian stood. She looked barely older than Jonas. I believe the envoy's mistake was honest, she said, and his response respectful. Maybe it's time we stopped punishing people for not knowing what we never told them. Tovak frowned but said nothing. The council chair nodded. Thank you, Serenalan. Cultural evolution begins with open minds. Then it was Nera's turn. She stepped forward slowly, her voice clear and calm. When Jonas reached for the bill that evening, I was shocked. I admit that. I believed he had dismissed our traditions. I believed he was testing my patience. But then we spoke, and I realized he wasn't disrespecting my culture. He was respecting his. The room quieted even more. I saw that his gesture was not weakness but strength of a different kind, she continued. Where I come from, a provider shows his worth. Where he comes from, a partner shows respect by sharing responsibility. These values seem to conflict, but underneath them is something shared. Care, intention, connection. She placed a hand gently on her chest where her pendant rested. And isn't that what diplomacy is? Learning to see value in something. Unfamiliar instead of fearing it. Tovak's voice rose again. But where do we draw the line, Neravel? If we bend every tradition to fit foreign customs, what will remain of our identity? Tradition doesn't vanish when it grows, Nera replied. It deepens, it strengthens. This exchange wasn't about removing what makes us Asteronian. It was about understanding what makes others different and valuable. The council chair lifted a crystal hand. We have heard enough. We shall recess to deliberate. As the lights dimmed slightly, Jonas returned to his seat beside Nera, his hands cold with nerves. That was incredible, he whispered. You weren't too bad yourself, she replied, allowing the smallest of smiles. They sat in silence for what felt like an hour. Maybe it was. Finally, the council returned. The chair stepped forward, its surface shimmering with soft light. The Unity Council recognizes the validity of both Asteronian tradition and Earth's evolving customs. We do not find deliberate insult in the envoy's actions. However, we encourage greater communication and cultural transparency moving forward. In the spirit of progress, we approve the proposal for a new initiative, the Heartbridge Project, a joint program to explore and educate about interspecies courtship and tradition. Applause spread through the chamber, slow at first, then stronger. Jonas exhaled deeply, not realizing he'd been holding his breath. Nera's hand found his for a brief second, just a touch, but enough to ground him in the moment. Afterward, as reporters floated drones near them for statements, and council aides scrambled to organize follow-up meetings, Jonas leaned close and said, Well, that was probably the strangest date I've ever been on. Nera chuckled. Let's hope the next one involves fewer cameras and fewer angry elders. But deep down, they both knew this was just the beginning. What started as a mistake over dinner was turning into something far more meaningful, for their cultures, and maybe for them too. 6 months later, Virelia Station shimmered, like a jewel in space, brighter and busier than ever. The Grand Promenade was alive with color, sound, and the smells of dishes from 20 different planets. Banners in every language streamed above the crowd. unity in diversity. The first galactic cultural festival. Visitors from dozens of worlds wandered between food stalls, art exhibits, and live performances. At the center of it all stood a pavilion made of glowing crystal and soft metal vines, where Jonas Reed adjusted the collar of his formal uniform and tried to calm his nerves. Jonas had never imagined he'd end up here, not just on the station, but as the face of something that mattered. What had started with a dinner disaster had become the heart of a movement. The Heart Bridge Project, born out of a misunderstanding, now connected species across the galaxy through shared stories, traditions, and yes, romantic customs. Today, he and Naravel would stand before that same council once more, not to defend a mistake, but to celebrate a new beginning. A soft voice brought him out of his thoughts. "Nervous, Jonas?" Nara stood beside him, radiant in deep green robes, edged with silver. Her hair was braided in the traditional Asteronian way, but a small earth pin, an open hand, was fastened over her heart. She looked proud, strong, and calm. Jonas, meanwhile, felt like his heart was trying to run a marathon. "Just a little," he said, smiling. "You?" "I've spoken in front of councils, generals, and the planetary archives," she replied. "But this is different. This is ours." They moved together toward the central platform where the ceremonial table waited. On it sat a shared bowl, a symbol from both Earth and Asteron. Each would place an item inside to represent their commitment. The crowd quieted as the two stood before the assembly. Lights dimmed and a warm golden spotlight bathed them. Jonas went first. From a small pouch at his side, he pulled out a simple item, a silver credit chip. "On Earth," he said, voice steady, "we share. In relationships, in responsibilities, in life. This chip represents how I was raised, to see partnership as equal." Then Nara stepped forward. She opened her palm to reveal a small crystal fruit, blue and glowing softly. On Asteron, the one who provides nourishment shows their devotion. This fruit is a traditional gift, a symbol of sustenance, of care. Together they placed the items into the bowl. The moment felt quiet but powerful. Then Nara surprised everyone by speaking again. "Tradition doesn't have to be abandoned to evolve. With Jonas, I've learned that love is not about power or roles. It's about understanding and choosing each other again and again." The crowd erupted into applause. Some delegates stood. Others clapped with limbs, tentacles, or musical tones from vocal sacs. A small group of young Asteronians waved banners with the Heart Bridge symbol. News drones floated close, transmitting the moment across space. After the ceremony, Jonas and Nara slipped away to a quiet spot on the observation deck, overlooking the wide field of stars. For a long time they said nothing, just enjoying the peaceful hum of the station and the feeling of shared success. "Remember when you tried to pay for dinner and nearly ended diplomatic relations across 3 star systems?" Nara said suddenly, grinning. "Vividly," Jonas replied. "You looked at me like I'd just insulted your entire ancestry." "You kind of did," she said, but her tone was teasing. "And yet, somehow you also impressed me." Jonas laughed. "Guess there's hope for awkward humans after all." They stood, close, their hands brushing. The bond between them, once just political and uncertain, had grown into something stronger. It was real, and despite their differences, they had found a way to meet in the middle. Suddenly, Nara turned serious. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you. In Asteronian culture, when 2 people share a ceremonial fruit during a public ceremony, it's not just symbolic. It's seen as a form of public commitment. Like your engagement, traditions on Earth." Jonas raised an eyebrow. "So, we're engaged?" "Technically, yes," she said. "If we follow both traditions, we just agreed to share responsibility, love, and food for the rest of our lives." He smiled, wide and genuine. "You know, that actually sounds pretty perfect." From the distance, the voices of festival goers grew louder as the evening celebration began. Music from 3 different planets mixed in the air, and colorful lights danced across the plaza. The first Heartbridge Festival was in full swing, and Jonas and Nera stood at the center of its story. They walked back into the light together, hand in hand, past vendors offering strange fruits and glowing pastries, past dancers in floating silks, past dignitaries from dozens of species who now looked at them not as rule breakers, but as pathfinders. Later that night, as they watched fireworks shimmer above the station, Jonas leaned close to Nera. "So what do you think we should do for our first shared cultural tradition?" Nera tilted her head thoughtfully. "Well, we could start with dinner, and this time you're allowed to pay." Jonas laughed, and together, they stepped into the night, where the stars stretched out ahead like a road paved just for them. What had started with a bill neither of them expected had become something far greater, a love story that translated across galaxies.